Welcome to our final lecture of the semester for History 120. We've talked about Reconstruction this week. We've talked about the mechanisms that Southern states and Southern politicians put in place in order to limit the rights of African Americans. We've talked about the newfound freedom of African Americans on the federal level. We've talked about the two competing mechanisms or ideologies used by Republicans to affect civil rights or a change in American society in the wake of the Civil War. So, how does it all come to an end? How is it that the federal government is going to sit back and allow certain things to happen that limit African American rights on the local level? For the most part, many of these issues were seen to be state and local legal matters and not something that the federal government could enforce or interfere with. We had a much stricter attention to issues that were state and local versus federal issues. And so very often the federal government, there were people that wanted to step in and do something, and legally it was seen that the federal government had no role in effecting any change or halting of a solution that was seen as negative towards African Americans. But Reconstruction comes to an end because the Republicans want to win the election of 1876. In the election of 1876, Rutherford B. Hayes, a Civil War veteran, is running for president as a Republican against Democratic candidate Samuel Tilden. And these two gentlemen end up in a statistical dead heat in the Electoral College. There are 19 votes disputed over. Neither of the two candidates has a clear plurality of the electoral votes that allows them to claim the presidency. And things are getting very tense. Here we are 12 years after the end of the Civil War, and there are local organizations across the North and South that see themselves preparing for a new civil war. There are people that truly believe that this election is so close that the only way we're going to be able to handle the situation is to go again through a violent revolution in order to determine the rightful winner of this election. Thankfully, calmer heads will prevail, and what they will do is they will call representatives of the parties and representatives of the candidates into the quintessential cigar smoke filled conference room. And they'll have these representatives sit down and negotiate what will it take to bring this election to a head, to end this crisis, and to put somebody in power in the White House. And eventually, Republicans will approach the Democrats and they will say, we will end military reconstruction. We will end the military occupation of the South. There were still areas in 1877 that had federal troops present as a means of acting as an occupier because of the Civil War. We'll remove all the troops from the South. We'll increase the amount of money that the federal government spends on internal improvement projects in the South. We'll even promise you some federal jobs as a spoils of the election. What this means, essentially, ever since the administration of Andrew Jackson, we see offices like local postmasters. Every post office has a postmaster that's in charge of that facility. local federal tax collectors or federal inspectors. These were seen as the spoils of the party. These were jobs that the party could hand out and use as patronage to reward loyal supporters of the party. So if you've got a guy in Sioux Falls that really adamantly works to get the local vote out to support the Republicans in the coming election, well, we're going to find a way to give him a job to say thank you for all the work he's done. These jobs had been controlled by Republicans since 1865, the end of the war in the South. This important form of patronage had been denied supporters of the Democratic Party. And so Democrats are saying, give us some of these patronage jobs back. Take the army out of the South. Give us some money to not just repair our railroads that were destroyed during the war, but to build new ones, to build new internal improvements, to improve our business opportunities that by and large are only going to reward wealthy white people in the South. If you do these things, we will release the 19 electoral votes that we control, and we will allow Hayes to become president. Essentially, what these people are proposing is if you end Reconstruction, if you end federal oversight of Reconstruction in the South, we'll let you win. And so in this crucial moment in January of 1877, January and February of 1877, the Republican Party abandons Reconstruction so that they can have a political victory, so that they can maintain the power over the presidency that they have enjoyed since 1860. Once the Northern Republicans accept the Compromise of 1877, Southern states will very quickly move to rescind at a local or state level any civil rights and Reconstruction legislation that's been passed, and they will block attempts to pass new legislation. Essentially, we see the vagrancy laws, the laws that implement tests and fees in order to vote, laws that limit African American civil rights are put in place across the South. And in many ways, what we see are the return to a de jure form or an extra legal form of social inequality. We have social inequality put into place through laws that remove the hindrance of voting rights, the laws that prevent African Americans from living in certain areas, or laws that deny certain civil rights to people based on the color of their skin. But we also see the return and the entrenchment of social customs meant to maintain African Americans in a secondary or second-class citizen status. And those laws will only become further and further entrenched with the Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court decision in the 1890s, which will create the doctrine of separate but equal. And a lot of these aren't going to be rescinded or changed or overturned until the 1960s. Some people would argue that maybe the Civil War isn't completely over until the 1960s. Maybe our victory on the ground was actually lost by the Republican abandonment of African Americans in the South in order to win the election of 1876. It's a very rough question. It's one that we're still dealing with today. And I want to bring up an image for you real quick. This is a timeline of slavery, segregation, and racial issues in the United States. As we've established in this class, the first slaves were brought to Jamestown in 1619. Slavery existed in this nation for 246 years. From 1865 to 1954, segregation was legal in the United States. Sorry about the mail pop-up message. There's nothing I can really do about that right now. Thank God it wasn't anything personal. It was just a reminder that I have to turn your grades in a timely manner once the semester is over. We have only been without, how do I state this? We have only lived 65 years in this country without laws that segregated African Americans legally from certain aspects of society, from certain mechanisms of society, be it voting or education or where you can ride on the bus. 65 years in the grand American experiment. You know people older than 65 years old. If you see an African American with gray hair, an African American in their 70s or in their 80s, you're looking at somebody who lived in a segregated America. The legacies of Reconstruction and the American Civil War are still that present in our society. We're having a debate now in our society about the presence of Confederate monuments. A debate about whether or not they should exist within American society. I'm hoping that I'm actually getting this message to you being recorded. We'll find out when I stop this. And it could very well be that the Civil War is not over. Our country is a country in flux. When we have gone to wars in recent history, we have talked about the implementation of democracy in other countries. I would say that we are still a relatively young country and that we know how to have a functioning democracy that is still in progress and still learning how to include everybody. That's the lesson I would take from this class this semester. The constant evolution of American history. We are not we are a state in constant search of what it means to be free. We are a nation in constant search of how to include everybody in the freedoms that we purport to enjoy. And that search is not over. That search didn't end in 1865 with the end of the Civil War. That search didn't end with the end of Reconstruction. It didn't end in 1964 or 1968 with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. It didn't end with the codification of gay marriage in this country. We're still trying to figure out what it means to be an American and what it means to enjoy the rights and privileges of citizenship in this country. And I think that's a good thing. I think we need to understand by looking at American history that we have not always extended civil rights to everybody, and that we need to reconsider these questions from time to time, that we cannot become stuck in our ways. But I'm beginning to get rather close to editorializing this class, and that's not what I'm here for. I want to thank you very much for your attention and your diligent work this semester. I hope you all have a wonderful break and good luck in your future endeavors. Thank you.